Silver 101, Module 3, British Silver. I come across British silver much more rarely in my appraisal work, but I consider it great fun. British silver is delightfully organized in its markings. Once you know how to read them, they will tell you absolutely everything you want to know. While American silver in many ways embodied the culture of the Wild West, with few rules or standards, British silver is the total opposite. British silver is a tangible embodiment of a highly professional and highly regulated guild system stretching back hundreds of years. The examples I encounter are often extremely well crafted. I use specialized reference books to research British silver, but it's not necessary to invest in a reference library for your project, as online sources can be used to identify most makers. One book I use is International Hallmarks on Silver collected by Tardy. This is a wonderfully quirky book that has marks for international silver. I use it all the time when cataloging British, French, German, and other international silver. Another book is Jackson's Silver and Gold Marks of England, Scotland, and Ireland, edited by Ian Pickford. I use this book to identify the marks of British silversmiths. There's a small pocket edition and a large book. I have the huge unabridged version. I'm going to start by introducing you to the 5 symbols that form the core of British silver hallmarks. There's the fineness mark, the city mark, the date mark, the maker's mark, and the duty mark. I like to start reading them in order from left to right. First, the fineness mark will tell me whether it's sterling or Britannia silver. Sterling is 925 parts per thousand silver, and Britannia silver is 958 parts per thousand silver. Next, the city mark will tell me where the piece was made. I use books like my copy of Tardy's International Marks to identify the specific city mark I'm looking at. I most frequently encounter the city mark for London, which looks like a leopard's head. Here are some common English city marks: London, Birmingham, Chester, and Sheffield. Scottish city marks include the Edinburgh city mark, and it has its own sterling mark, and the Glasgow city mark, which also has its own sterling mark. Irish city marks include the Dublin city mark, which also has its own corresponding sterling mark. After I determine the city, then I can go look for the date letter mark. Each city mark has a linked set of corresponding date letter marks that are unique to that city. The date letter marks change very subtly over time through alterations to the rendering of the letter and the shape of the cartouche around it. And in this example of London date marks over a long span of time, you can see just how subtly it changes sometimes between the letter and the shape of the cartouche, and it can be really tricky to tell when you're looking at a tiny example that's hammered into the handle of a piece. The date letter mark in 1810 for a piece of silver made in London was completely different from the date letter mark in 1810 for a piece of silver made in Sheffield, so it's important to identify the city first. Date letter marks can be consulted online at websites like 925.1000.com and silvercollection.it. Now that I have the city and the year from the date mark, then I look at the maker's mark. A maker's mark is often just initials in a shaped cartouche. Unless it's a mark I recognize immediately, I consult my reference book, Jackson's Hallmarks. The book's marks are organized by city, so I check out the listing of silversmiths active in the city marked on the piece and look for a match fitting the time range of the date letter. Jackson's Hallmarks can be quite expensive to buy as it's out of print, so for most instances, the information on the free website should be sufficient. The shape of the cartouche around the initials in a maker's mark is really important, as several silversmiths in a town might have the same initials. For example, we have 2 RCs here. One is Richard Cook and one is Richard Crossley, but the only difference really is the shape of the cartouche, whether it's rectangular or rounded, so every little detail is important when it comes to maker's marks. The duty mark was introduced in 1784 to indicate whether tax had been paid on the piece at the time it was created. Duty marks were represented by a silhouette of the reigning monarch's head. The system of applying duty marks was abolished in 1890. It's not a crucial part of identifying your silver, and quite frankly, honestly, they look a lot like blobs. So don't worry if you can't clearly read yours. These are examples of what the duty marks look like, and we have 5 examples here, 2 that are for George III, a George IV, William IV, and Queen Victoria. Something fun about British silver is that detachable elements like lids were always marked along with the main body of the piece, which didn't happen with American silver. If the main marks aren't clear, a helpful trick is to study them elsewhere on the piece, like on the parts of this apern. It's also a good idea to make sure the marks all match and the piece hasn't been married, as we say in the field.